what we're going to be creating today is Wycinanki. Wycinanki is Polish paper cutting. So we are going to be cutting out designs and adding layers that we're going to be cutting. So I'm going to be showing you some specific techniques to help you keep this symmetrical. We have a black symmetrical design, meaning it's kind of reflected or the same on both sides, but then we're also going to be cutting out layers and pieces that also need to be the same on both sides. So pay close attention to these techniques today for our Polish paper cutting activity. Super excited. Let's get started. So what you need for this project is something to protect the table, make sure we don't get glue on it. We need a piece of white paper, black paper, and then a variety of colored paper, as well as a pencil, scissors, and then glue or a glue stick. That is your choice. What we're going to start with first is our black piece of paper. Something I want to mention as I'm getting that ready, you do want to make sure that your black piece of paper and white piece of paper are the same size. So if for whatever reason yours are different sizes, you do want to make sure you take the time to cut it down so that they are the same size. But like I said, we're going to start with our black piece of paper, so I'm just scooting all of this out of the way. And what you're going to do with your black piece of paper is you are actually going to fold it in half. You're going to do so the long ways. Once you have folded this in half, we're then going to draw our background design. As you can see, the black design here, that is the largest section of the design itself. And we're going to draw it, making sure that we keep the design connected to the center fold. So we're imagining that this is half of this design. This is our center, and all of our design needs to stay connected to the center. When you're drawing this, Wycinanki has different types of designs, typically traditionally, and typically there is kind of nature, flowers, specifically roosters are common as well. So if you want to take the time to maybe look up an idea or inspiration for your design, you want to try to keep it maybe more traditional, and that's going to give you some ideas. But when you draw this design, it's very important that it stays connected to the center. So I have one prepared right here, and it might be kind of hard to see in the video, but you can see my pencil lines. So you're going to go ahead and make sure you take the time to draw your design, keeping it connected to the center. I have a rooster, I have some flowers and kind of vines coming out. And once you have this design, feel free to give this a pause or take a minute. We are going to cut this out. So I'm going to take a minute, I'm going to cut this out, and you can do so as well. For my older group, sometimes students will even use kind of X-Acto knives. But for my elementary, we stick with scissors, so something we can cut out. And it's okay if you need the help of your learning coach for this. Cutting, especially if you have some designs in there, are kind of hard to cut around. Notice that I am cutting this while it's still folded. What this is going to do is it's going to make it so that the same design I'm cutting on this side will be reflected symmetrically to the other side. That's why we have that center fold. You have to be very careful for this. It's easy to accidentally cut something off that you did not intend to. So be sure to take your time, look at your lines. Traditionally, for this Polish paper cutting, the Wycinanki is actually cut using sheep shears. Most friends do not have sheep shears at home, so especially those are much larger. So of course we're going to use the scissors that we are familiar with. Traditionally, for this Polish paper cutting, the Wycinanki is actually cut using sheep shears. Most friends do not have sheep shears at home, so especially those are much larger. So of course we're going to use the scissors that we are familiar with. It makes a lot more sense now that we're seeing this, how we were talking about it being connected to the center. We're getting closer. Careful not to let it rip, especially if you have tiny, intricate designs. If it does happen to rip though, don't panic, because as you know, we're going to be gluing things today. So you will maybe have the opportunity to fix it by gluing it down to the paper that we're going to move on to next. So after you finish this cutting portion, you can go ahead and maybe take a second to throw away your scraps of black paper and go ahead and grab your white paper where we are going to glue this down. Okay. Now I'm just going to scoot mine off to the side and grab my white paper. Okay, so on the white paper with your glue or glue stick, we are going to be carefully gluing down our design. Now, we're going to be kind of drawing and cutting out many other small intricate designs, so it's important to go ahead and note that when you are drawing and then cutting out, you're still going to sometimes have some pencil lines on there. So it is okay to glue it down so that the pencil lines are on the opposite side. So I opened it up and then I flipped it over. So then I could glue it like this so that I could no longer see the pencil lines, okay? Now, when I'm gluing, whether it's glue or glue stick, I wanna make sure that I am putting the glue on the correct side and that I'm not putting a ton, it just takes a little bit. I'm gonna use a glue bottle because I can put kind of dots, but if you are using a glue stick, you wanna be extra, extra careful that you're really holding it tightly down to the surface and applying the glue gently, because what can happen is if you're scrubbing and rubbing the glue on really fast, it could accidentally rip your paper as well. So just carefully applying things. So I'm gonna add a little bit with my glue bottle. I'm not pouring it on there, just getting a light bit on the surface. So a lot of designs going on. Take a minute to get this glue. You want to try to do this rather quickly before your glue starts to dry a bit in some spots, especially the glue stick. And it is okay if you add some glue and then glue it down and find that some of your edges are maybe kind of poking or sticking out. It's pretty normal. You need to go back in and add a little bit more glue on the edges and then press them down. Okay. Now when I flip this over and add it, carefully, I'm gonna see if I can find, ooh, it's kind of droopy, huh? Let's see if I can get it in the center. This might take some adjusting carefully. You don't want to press too hard too quick. So I didn't press it down fully because I'm gonna have to move it around to try to get it to fit to the paper like it should. The biggest challenge with this is once that glue kind of maybe rubs around in other places, sometimes when it dries, it's nice because you can't really see it. It dries clear, but sometimes when it dries, it leaves a little bit of a glossy surface that you can see in some areas. So I'm gonna try to press this in, then maybe go in and see if I can maybe clean it up a bit so that it's not as visible. But what's also nice is we're also going to be gluing down those kind of layers on top. So what that does is gives us an opportunity to maybe kind of hide maybe where it might be really visible on the plaque. But we don't want it kind of drenched in the glue. That's where we start to get a little bit of issues or concerns. Okay, perfect. What I'm doing now is I've got just a slightly dampened paper towel that I've grabbed, and I'm gonna try to maybe kind of dab up some of the glue, the extra glue in some spots. Don't rub too hard because you could rip your paper. Okay, now we're gonna start to move on to our layers, and how we do this, there's a bit of a technique to it to help us, is remembering that we are going to be putting layers onto our Wycinanki, Polish paper cutting. But if we put it on one side, we're going to then have to make sure we put it on the other side. So I'm going to be showing you a technique to make sure when you cut something out, you cut a shape out, that is then reflected to the other side as well. Also, it's important to notice that some areas there's a single layer added, some areas there's 3. So it's up to you, but I do want to really encourage you, at least some areas, to add some additional layers rather than just one. So the technique I'm going to show you is we are going to start with a colored piece of paper, and we're actually going to cut this down first. So this layer is going to be added to this kind of flower area up here. So I'm going to kind of cut this area down to equal up to about double of that area. It doesn't have to be precise, but what we're doing is we're kind of cutting it down before we start drawing, so that we can see approximately the size that we want to kind of draw. The reason I suggested cutting it out almost about double of the area is because what you want to do first is fold it. What this does is it will allow us to draw a design, and then when we cut out that design, what is it going to give us? 2. So it's automatically going to give us the reflection to the other side. So I have my paper folded. I'm going to scoot this over a bit. And when I have this kind of side by side, it gives us a better approximate kind of area where we need to draw this so that it'll fit here. So once we draw this and cut this out, we can't add more green paper to it, but what we can do is we can also cut it down a little bit. Versus if we're trying to draw this design just fully with this paper right here. So I am going to imagine this layer is just slightly smaller than this area. I'm going to kind of try to mimic the design behind it. I'm going to take my scissors, make sure it's folded still over. I'm going to cut it out. And once I cut this out, it is okay to go back and cut it down more if it's needed. But if you do find that you need to cut it down, you want to make sure that both pieces of paper are being cut at the same time. That's the only way you're going to be able to guarantee that your reflection is exactly the same on both pieces that are going to be glued down. Now remember, if there's pencil lines, it is okay to flip. If the pencil lines are there, but you want it to stay to a specific position, it is okay to maybe go in and lightly erase your pencil lines as well. So mine's matching up pretty well. I do see some spots where I maybe cut it down just a tiny bit. So I'm going to pick this up. Kind of just indicating lightly with my pencil where I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to lift it up, but before I cut, what do I need to do? I need to make sure I put it back with my original piece. That way I can get a perfectly reflected layer that I'm going to add to the other side. Okay, now I could go ahead and I could glue this down. Now when I glue it down, I want to make sure I put the other one on the other side in the same position. And then I would encourage my friends, especially in an area like this, after they glue it down, to maybe cut another layer that's going to fit inside of here. So that one would need to be a little bit smaller, but you would follow that same technique. You cut a piece that's about double the size you want it to be, fold it in half, draw your design, and then cut it out. And then you could continue that process and add up to 3 or 4 layers, maybe just to that one area. But I'm going to do a little time lapse, work on my layers a bit. While I'm working on my layers, I'm going to encourage you to work on yours. But you do want to find kind of what I call a balance. So if I put a bunch of layers up here, but there's not any layers down here, that's not visually appealing, not visually balanced. So I'm going to add some layers throughout, and I want to encourage you to take the time to do the same. And I'll see you back in a couple of minutes. Okay, once you have added all of your layers, the last thing you want to do is you want to make sure you go in and see if there's any edges that might be kind of picked up or lifting up, and kind of gently glue them down. You could also take your paper towel and maybe lightly dampen it and gently pick up where there's any extra kind of glue gathered around. Don't forget to add your name, and I cannot wait to see yours. I know it's gonna look awesome.